Welcome back. I'm Chad Rauch with CR Dynamics, and today I'm talking with someone who's built a career inside some of the biggest medical supply companies in North America. We're talking Syntron, Medline, and then made a deliberate choice to go back to something smaller and fight for the bigger fish, or just smaller fish, excuse me. So Nick Kosior, VP of Sales at Bioseal, a Southern California manufacturer, has been quietly helping hospitals reduce costs, patient risk over the last 3 decades. So Nick, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chad. Good to be here. Thank you.
So real quick, why don't you give us a story of Bioseal? How did the company start? What's the main mission for today?
Sure. Yeah. So Bioseal started in the late 80s. Our president and founder still with us today, Bill Runyon, was working at a local hospital in Southern California, Orange County, within the sterile processing department. And just like SPD managers and directors do today, they had their teams working on various projects and really just noticed that there was a lot of inefficiencies at the time, unnecessary risk in and around products that they were never going to see again. And that was the products at the time. It still happens today, but those type of products, Coban, swabs, very basic products. Bill felt like there was an opportunity for his department at the time, excuse me, to outsource those products, and felt like there's an opportunity for other surrounding hospitals as well. And so founded Bioseal to do minor product sterilization and create an opportunity for those hospitals to move those products off of their plate and focus on supporting the operating room. And it's been continued to be our mission to this day. And that's what we continue to do. We're actively looking for it, SPD needs and supporting those. Although now we have over 2,500 product SKUs that we add to every week. And so we have stock products ready to support customers with these needs, and a national field sales team actively working with accounts to try to build the business and help them out, help their patient care.
That's awesome. So it's kind of like, do you say the switch was kind of more in kind of like a kitting operation for you guys, and kind of getting everything ready for the OR rooms?
Yeah, so the sterile processing department we feel is and is seen traditionally as the engine room for the operating suite, right? Actually, there's a SPD that I talk about and reference quite often, that right above the door for the sterile processing department, it has a big sign that says, "You can't operate without us," which is a very true statement. And so we feel that if there's anything that's an auxiliary product or products or instruments that are going outside of the operating room, there's most likely an opportunity to outsource those to a company like Bioseal. So if there's bandage scissors going to wound care across town, if there's instruments going to the emergency department, if there's cheek retractors, other plastic or wood, supplies, or anything that's not an instrument utilized in a procedural tray that's going to be utilized in the operating room, there's an opportunity to outsource those products and improve efficiencies within the department, and hopefully have the ability and the capability to turn around instrument sets for the operating room. There's constantly needs for the operating room to say, "Hey, turn this set around quickly. We have a stat case, we have a new case, we have an emergent case." And SPD is unfortunately kind of burdened by, "Hey, we need to do 800 nail nippers." Is a true story from a conversation I had last week. 800 to 1,000 nail nippers per week for the podiatry department across campus. If we were able to have a cost-effective but also high-quality single-use instrument to offsource those 1,000 nail nippers per week, you can theorize pretty easily the time savings that and the opportunity cost that was utilized for those instruments that SPD could recapture and repurpose for turning around a total knee set, for example, or some other procedural tray.
Mm-hmm. So from an operation standpoint, that's where my mind's going. That's like the same ROA language that kind of you'd use. You don't know what the cost is to not fix the problem. So kind of going an
Correct.
alternative path, sets you up for future gains down the road.
Exactly.
So kind of breaking the standard model, so to speak. So that's
Yep.
awesome. Kind of jumping around a little bit. First time we chatted, you mentioned you had 4,000 SKUs, and now you said you're down to
Oh, sure.
2,500. What made you realize you had a complexity problem? I mean, that's a lot of SKUs to manage and handle and sell. And how did you decide to decide what stays and then kind of what goes?
It's funny, we actually have, so this is an initiative that we've had over the past couple of years at Bioseal has been to say, we traditionally have just been the easy button. We just kind of blindly go out and source new products and we have created this extensive catalog. But for example, we found out that we were offering about 3, 4 different SKUs on pencils, sharpened pencils. Now, there's certainly a need for pencils, but is there a need for a Ticonderoga pencil and a Dixon pencil? Probably not. Is there a need for a 2-pack and a single pack and a 3-pack? Probably not. And so, but it's just been the head down, blinders on. We're going to fix the problem for an account, which has got us to the point we're at today, right? But there's really no problem with saying, hey, we're not going to source a third manufacturer of number 2 pencil. We're going to stick with the 2 offerings that we have today. And so we've just done some product consolidation with very similar products like that in order to really nail down what the anticipated volume is at an annual or monthly basis for certain products. And then we've had another focus on proactively producing those products in anticipation of customer needs, rather than reactively starting building products and sterilizing and producing products after receiving an order. So we anticipate having product on the shelf for those products in anticipation of needs, as I mentioned. But because of that, we have almost 40 years worth of experience. We know what the market needs. We know what the mix of products are that are most that make the biggest impact and that customers will move to Bioseal. So it just makes sense to have those as stock products ready to go.
In my years in manufacturing, I've seen the same thing too. You have kind of that one little variant and it's, oh, we don't have it on as a SKU. So you recreate one, you say, and the shop floor is sitting there like, really? We're making, like you said, 2 pencils to 3 pencils?
Yeah.
It kind of just, it gets crazy a little bit. So it's glad you guys are taking that approach to scale down a bit. That's going to be, your shop floor guys are going to love you for that. I'll tell you
Sure.
that.
Yeah, it's and there's other opportunities we've had, if you can use a 9-inch worth of tubing, we probably don't need to create an 11-inch worth of tubing, but we certainly could. It's the same tubing. And so
Exactly.
that's what we've taken a look at. There have been high numbers of product SKUs, but then they've just been replaced over time. They don't become as important over time. We'd be able to consolidate some product SKUs, and so now we're down to about 2,500 overall SKUs with 400 stock products that we're going to work on this year.
Now, kind of then, how do you balance that make to order flexibility with then your customers' kind of efficiency of the stocking of your core products? The economy, the workforce is kind of tight with resources. So how do you kind of handle that kind of, made to order flexibility versus the readiness of stock?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's even more important. We are a completely and solely domestic company. We're all based in Southern California. So we have American employees that we pay American wages, and it's specifically in Southern California, honestly. And so what we like to do is, try to offer the most cost-effective product to our customers. And so some of these we still do we still do custom products and requests. We still offer those non-stock products. Although, as you expect, most customers are not willing or can't accept, well, hey, it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks for a product to be produced and go through sterilization services. That's really what draws our timelines out, is the fact that they need to be sterilized, right?
Yeah.
And so we do offer proactive stocking agreements for those customers that will say, hey, you know what, this might be a non-stock product for us as a whole, as a company, but we could stock this for you as an individual customer. And so what that allows us to do is, with a just very basic agreement, we're able to stock 3-4 months worth of their supplies on hand for them. So they have stock that's readily available for them to purchase in any increments that they want, but it allows us to have 3 months worth of their inventory as a larger production job. So we get some efficiency there on our side.
Absolutely. You get the efficiencies, you get the predictability, you get kind of and also the value add of the service. Who wants to be sitting on boxes and boxes of something sterilized in their OR room, right? Pass it to the supplier. So
we have some inventory space we'll use for them. Sure.
I mean, it doesn't rain in Southern California, right? So just store it outside. I'm sure it'll be
Most of
fine,
the time,
right?
although this week, yeah, it's been a while. Yeah,
I'm just joking, but no, kind of switching gears a bit. I know kind of the your story is kind of very appealing itself, going from the David versus the Goliath, kind of you're in the small kind of
sure.
business, but you've worked at a $300 million company. Now you spent time at a $20 billion one. How's it feel going to something even smaller, around 30 million, and running their sales? What made you choose that smaller fight?
Part of it was kind of going back to my roots. I was with Centurion Medical Products. We were formerly called Tri-State Hospital Supply. My father started in 1985 at Tri-State Hospital Supply, and I joined him after college, after my undergrad. And so that was my comfortability zone, I would say.
Hmm.
Nothing against that. There was almost unlimited resources at the large distributor I was with.
Yeah.
But to understand where the customers, where their wants and needs were coming from, and the impact with being at Centurion and seeing that bedside impact of products and solutions and working through with customers, it just wasn't necessarily the focus at the larger company. The larger company I was with, it was more about maintaining the growth trajectory that they were on, which obviously they've been extremely successful. So that
Hmm.
strategy has worked out well for them. But I think what is missed is just the day-to-day impact and the review and discussion about creating efficiencies, reducing risk, with the underlying focus of patient care. Now, for the focus on patient care can be totally different. There's hey, if I save you 10% on $100,000, then you can reutilize that on patient care as well. And so, that just wasn't the bedside impact is more of what I was looking for. The opportunity to build a sales team of diverse backgrounds. We bring in the sales team that we've built here at Bioseal. We have urology specialists, we have clinic specialists, post-acute specialists, we have some sales members that have previously done capital equipment, that have done implants and been in surgical procedures. And so by building this diverse supportive group, we can get in deep within hospitals and work it. Yes, our focus is still supporting sterile processing, but as I have lovingly said at our national sales meeting several times, zero procedures are performed in the sterile processing department. So everything that we sell impacts patients outside of said department. Yes, there's time efficiencies, and but the patients are on the floors. They're in the operating suites. They're in the medical, surgical, labor delivery, intensive care. And so by working with clinicians and leadership outside of sterile processing, that's where we get the sales that are most impactful to us as individual contributors here at BioSeal, but that support our communities, right? And so I think that's really the core of why I came over to BioSeal, is to embrace the opportunities to build a sales team, but to get back to that really direct patient impact, caregiver impact, and yeah, it's been successful. It's been 4 years now almost.
I can relate. I've been in similar situations. You with the startup companies, you go to
Yeah,
the big companies, but there's something about that startup where you're developing and building something from scratch.
sure.
And you have a direct impact, and you can see the fruits of your labor to your customers. They're more receptive. You have that kind of that touch, almost
Yeah,
real close touch, as opposed to you're a number or you're a vendor or you're a supplier. It's kind of get further and further away from that direct contact. So no, that's a very compelling story. Love it. Your your main competitors though, Medline, Cardinal, Owens and Minor and things like that, they've been acquiring everybody else. How do you guys stand out differently and keeps you guys winning? What separates you from those big guys? Is it back to that personal touch you mentioned?
yeah, that's really the difference, that the differentiating factor of BioSeal that we bring to negotiation discussions. And we've just decided that we're not going to play. I mean, I said, we're just not going to play in that low cost space. You know, we're going to focus on what we do best, which is a personal, consultative sales approach and discussion about what impacts some products might need, or hey, if we take a look at X, Y, what would that do for you? What do you like about your current products or solutions that you utilize? What don't you like about them? What could we solve? What could we replace? How could we work directly with you? Um, and I think not everybody's looking for, I don't know, the Costco approach to healthcare. Like, yes, there's certain products that you're going to be able to um, to purchase at scale, and there's certain products that can be consolidated to certain product, single or small product grouped offerings. But we have found that there's a market need for a company like Bioseal. There's a market need certainly for our products. The sterile processing department professional community has traditionally been underserved by a company like ours. And so we feel like there's a niche that we can continue to support. We're not able to, compete directly with Medline on either, or Cardinal Health or Owens & Minor for that matter, on their scale of purchasing of some raw materials and products. And so, we do have to, in some cases, walk our customers through what we can do well and what they can do well and how we can partner, right? But that's the type of salespeople we have, and that's our sales approach, is to just be upfront, honest, and on what we can do well and how we can help them and impact their bottom line or their time spent to do X. But that's unique to us, and that's what we offer.
No, that's the uniqueness, but the how do I say, kind of the openness and the forwardness of kind of the honesty approach. I think
Sure.
that's the best approach. And do you have an example how that kind of positioned you differently to secure the win versus the low cost approach by the big fish?
Yeah. So I mean, I would say that there has been a push for lower quality, lower price, excuse me, single-use instrumentation, and because of that, you can only squeeze so much before you have to drop the quality. And so quite often there are instrument projects brought to us directly to say, hey, yeah, this is no longer something that we're doing in-house that we need a single-use replacement for, but we're actually doing, what's an example of this? I had one of our salespeople recently had a project for a facial laceration tray in emergency department, right? And he's telling me about the story and everything. Hey, this is, where do you think I should go here? What instruments is really what the salesperson's asking me. What instrument part number should I be utilizing to build this thing? And so we're going through this project, and I shared with him, I said, I don't think that they really need a laceration tray constructed and reprocessed by SPD in the emergency department. I really think, and you should, let's connect with the end users in the emergency department. I really think that they probably are just not happy with their single-use tray. And the salesperson is sharing, this is a low-use tray. They maybe use one or two a month. So, we could do a case of 20, it'll get them through the year. And I'm thinking to myself, they're doing 200, 300 laceration cases a month. I mean, putting stitches in little kids and everybody in the community is one of the most common procedures in the emergency department. And so sure enough, he went back to go visit the emergency department, and they had a stock, very basic part number from a big supplier, their distributor. And the emergency department director and nursing leadership in the department says, yeah, these instruments are just not good enough. And so, there are certain cases, typically facial cases or, cases where we need to put stitches in on joints or things like this, that we have to go get an instrument set, right? An SPD focused instrument set. So the project became, well, instead of doing 20 per year, why don't we take a look at the 300 per month that you utilize, which is just ineffective. I had to take one of my daughters in to get stitches, unfortunately, at an emergency department at a community-based hospital. And I kid you not, the physician brought out a competitive instrument set. And, I had my own thoughts in my head, but before I would have said, well, I would have said something. It was my daughter's face. I mean, come on. Before I could say anything, I kid you not, this physician says, and get me one of those needle holders. And so the nursing team brought her a reusable SPD reprocessed needle holder, a high quality needle holder. I was relieved because I knew what they were going to open up and utilize, but at the same time, you're thinking like, how ridiculous is this that the hospital is purchasing an instrument set for you to utilize to do your job, but it's not good enough, right?
Yeah.
And I asked the physician, after she was done, do you do this? I mean, is this she's like, oh yeah, every single time I have to ask for a needle holder. I can't use a needle holder in here. I mean, it's just things like that happen in healthcare that, increase complexity, increase spend that are just behind the scenes. You know what? Really, if you had a higher quality set of instruments that you could depend on, then you probably wouldn't have to ask for sterile processing to support a single instrument every time that you, as a emergency care physician, needed to do what is one of your most common tasks of a day, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, oh, there you go. That's the impact that we try to make, and that's how we work around some of the big. That was a an instrument tray and a laceration tray from one of the big guys. In both of those situations, two of the three big guys that you mentioned, that was their laceration tray. So
That's kind of funny. Kind of you mentioned how like the healthcare is changing, how kind of the needs are not always provided as they are. So the delivery model is changing. More outpatient clinics, more urgent cases, more kind of ER things or the quick stop, but has procedures moving out of the hospital. I think the ambulatory surgery centers are kind of the
yeah.
next best thing. How is that shift creating opportunities for BioSeal?
Well, the sterile processing department, again, still our focus, right? The sterile
Hmm.
processing department has, unfortunately, they're, I don't know if you knew this, they're typically in the basement, right? And so as hospitals, buildings continue to expand, they're always adding on hospitals, right? Wings and
Yeah.
departments. But besides that, hospitals and hospital systems are acquiring, as you mentioned, those outpatient clinics, ambulatory surgery centers, and spreading their influence and their patient base across town, geographies, states, what have you, right? Um, that means more and more work for sterile processing, and they're in the basement. They don't get additional space. It's very hard to make your basement larger, right?
That
But
is
it
true.
is right. And then, but as building out clinic systems, for example, where they have internal medicine, podiatry, dermatology, all these specialties that are, over time they feed patients into the health system network. Um, we've seen that as health systems acquire private practices, it just compounds the needs of sterile processing. They'll start the process of, well, we're no longer going to be doing your instruments at the end of the day and at it within the medical suites. We'll just ship them back and forth to sterile processing, right? So then it adds to the workload of sterile processing and adds to the cost of providing care because you have this transportation cost. There's also governing bodies and regulatory requirements and guidelines around point of use of medical instrumentation following a procedure, containment and transport of used medical instruments within a clinic or outside of a clinic. And so then you have to follow, there's a lot of complexity there and adds to the overall cost and timelines of instrument management. And so as these hospital systems have continued to do this and continue to add this burden to sterile processing, it just presents more and more opportunities for us to work with sterile processing professionals and those
Mhm.
clinics, right? Because if you're acquiring private practices, you have physicians that are, rightfully so. Most physicians are very specific in the instrument
Yeah.
that's their tools of the trade, right? And back to my example of the emergency room physician, right? But if I'm a private practice and I have a dermatology practice that has been acquired, there's a level of instrumentation that I expect.
Yeah.
And so if I expect that instrumentation and I'm utilizing now the neighborhood acute care medical center sterile processing department, I'm going to have a high level and a high bar of what I might consider to be acceptable from a single use instrument manufacturer, supplier like Bioseal or any other. And so again, we don't play in that low cost space by
Mhm.
choice, because we want to be able to support physicians. And, I had a conversation with a distributor that we work with recently, and I was talking about some of our instrumentation, but recent in this specific example, but a number of products that Bioseal said. And I said, I tell you what, we are not going to bring a product to the table that you're going to be embarrassed bringing Bioseal, right? That's it. Your account or our shared account, again, this is a local regional distributor.
Yeah.
Whoever we're working with, they might not buy Bioseal product because of the price, right? They might not, they might have some hesitancy about a stocking agreement or something like that, where they're signing up to be responsible for inventory, and that's understandable. But we're never going to be presenting a product that, or an instrument, and back to this example, that we don't feel like is an acceptable quality or unreliable instrument. And I can say that with confidence across the entire Bioseal product portfolio is we're not discussing products or presenting products or pushing products or, offering products to customers to be used on members of the community that we ourselves would not be utilized, would want to be utilized on us or our family. And so that's just what we offer. That's, I think, is a little bit different. Not that there's just that focus that we have the time to bring to the table.
No, I think that's the best value you can add is kind of the example you said. If I'm not willing to use this on myself or my family, why would I
Yeah,
push it out to the market?
yeah.
You know, so kind of your differentiation is kind of just the market and the kind of the tools that you push out there. You're making sure that's something that you want to use. But from an operational standpoint, let's kind of switch gears a little bit.
Okay,
As the demand
sure.
is growing, your product is there, but what are you guys doing differently so you don't lose scale, but you know that you're building something or investing something differently to meet that demand?
So well, back to the instruments, just because it was just a topic we just discussed.
Mhm.
We just have to go in order to compete. We still have to, even if we want to compete with high quality instruments, we have to go directly to the source. So we've had to go directly to manufacturing sites in Pakistan, which is where single-use instruments and most medical instruments are manufactured and or finished. And that, we had to build new relationships there, which take time. But it also requires us to invest heavily in inventory. This lead times are much longer and extensive if we want to have, we have various product groups of instruments. If we have a lower product group of instruments as far as low volume, but we anticipate volume, we might need to anticipate and invest in inventory that, hey, we might need this 6 to 8 months from now. Versus previously, we worked with domestic brokers and suppliers that held inventory of instruments, and we were able to get them more quickly. So while this is an example for instruments, this is an example of what we do to compete throughout the entire Bioseal product portfolio. Is we have to expand the way that we source and focus on the most cost-effective, high-quality solutions that we can get, whether that be from a domestic distributor, domestic broker, or if we go directly to manufacturers overseas.
No, I mean sounds like a great strategy. I mean tariffs are increasing or decreasing or
Real,
paused
yeah,
every now and then. You get supply chain volatility with airspaces and waterways being closed
yeah.
up these days. It's a good way to keep the pressure off you guys with staying ahead of the focus. So that's a great operational strategy. And then I think the other point that you mentioned is the domestic. You guys, the local domestic manufacturer, so you got a little bit more control internally to
Yeah.
fight those tariffs and those supply chain issues. So overall, it seems like you got a great operational mindset kind of in plan in place to meet that demand as it grows. So excellent, kudos to you guys and your team there. Kind
Well,
of
I
the
mean, it does seem like that way. It does seem like that when I tried to explain it, and being at BioSteel for almost 4 years, as I mentioned. I do, but I will. I mean, that's not Nick's effort and energy. That is the efforts of Bill, our president, and our sourcing teams who have continued to push and work for and find new suppliers. We're constantly going to, in June, we're going to an International Medical Expo in South Florida with a focus of trying to meet suppliers for specific products that we need to, components that we feel like we've been sourcing domestically, but we know that they're coming from OUS sources. And again, we're trying to find opportunities to decrease our overall production costs, decrease our inventory costs, to continue to provide, if not the current level of service and quality, then a higher level of service and quality to our customers at the same price.
No, like I said,
Yeah.
you are the face of BioSteel right now, but no, it is a team effort. I mean,
Yeah.
the operation. I'm speaking from an operation guy. You get no guts, no glory is kind
Yep.
of the operation side of things. So no, I'm glad you spotted out the team there because it is a true team effort to make everybody successful.
Yep.
So kind of just wrapping up on kind of the last kind of the question, it kind of goes back to that whole um, David versus Goliath, kind of. So if there's a business owner listening right now, who's in that same David versus Goliath fight, competing against companies tens or hundred times their size, what's the piece of advice you'd give them?
Bring in somebody like me. No, well, it's not untrue. It's really hard to understand your competition in a place like Bioseal, right? Without having some experience from the other side. You know, you can do market level research and you can try to, but what I think that I have brought to our sales team is an understanding of what their focus is, what our competition's focus is. That's unique. And what drives them as a company. Now, maybe not what drives them as a company is, and not it doesn't necessarily differ from BioSeal, to be honest and truth, right? It's just how they work with customers to accomplish those goals. And I understand that it leaves space for a company like decisions, right? I've used the example numerous times that nobody goes to an appliance store and says, "Give me the cheapest refrigerator," right? I mean, nobody said, and you don't say this about anything that you do in your daily life. I don't want to know anything about features and benefits differences, how much electricity it draws. Just give me the cheapest one.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, that is an acceptable approach, right? From a business perspective, a lot of the time it is. But nobody buys the cheapest paper every time. Nobody buys the cheapest light bulbs every time. And so there's always going to be an opportunity for a very specific and tailored approach, right? And so I think that if you have a small business and you're going up against a much larger business, yes, you have to have something that differentiates your offerings, whether that be your salespeople, your quality, your approach, your pricing. But you also need to really understand your competition, and really understand the how your customers react to your competition, right? And what the impact to your customers would be moving away from the competition. Something that we do regularly is we have to illustrate that the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same. And so if our customers, in working in conjunction with our salespeople, can understand fully the pain that they're experiencing today, if there is pain to it, or whatever the disruption or the focus or the loss or the risk that they have today, if they understand that risk is there, and they understand that Bioseal alternative products or any smaller business alternative products can offer something that has, yes, it's going to take some time to convert, and yes, you might wind up paying a little bit more per each, or you might have to break a contract, or you might have to reduce some spend here or there to move it over to a competing company. But if that pain is less than what you're experiencing now, then and your customers are willing to move over, then you should have a compelling offering, right?
Well said. I think that's a great ending point on that. So Nick, I just want to thank you for the great conversation. Really appreciate you pulling back the curtain on kind of what it takes to compete and win, and kind of where everyone around you is getting acquired, separating yourself from all those guys. So where you can find people, just let me know where you can find you and BioSeal if they want to connect with you.
Yeah. So so we're available. I get inquiries through our website quite often is the best. I'm on the website, as are all of our individual salespeople. They each have their own contact pages. But we're on any main social media sites, can contact BioSeal. But yeah, we like to be contacted directly, and we're one of those companies. You call the customer service line, we have somebody in Orange County, California that will pick up the phone. And so yeah, that's the easiest way to get hold of us. And thanks for having me, Chad. I enjoyed our conversation.
Well, no, I appreciate it, and like I said, this is going to go up on my YouTube, my LinkedIn. I'll tag BioSeal and everything there. So, Nick, thanks again, and appreciate your time. Off to bigger and better adventures, correct?
Yep, yep. That's the
All right,
plan.
all right. That's a wrap.